Hello, Croeso Fulcher. Welcome back to the channel. All boy here, and all the best to you all for the new year. I've obviously been away for a while, so I do apologise. Routine, and there we have it. And before you know it, and we're going to start off today. Oh, there we go. And we're going to be looking at Larissa today. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Okay, so we're going back to Pelasgus, just for a little recap. So there's various versions of the myth, slightly different lineages and stuff with regards to the descent of Pelasgus. So this is from a Dictionary of Greek and Roman Biography by William Smith. So he says, in the Arcadian myth, according to the Arcadian tradition, he was either an autochthon, which is like a native, or a son of Zeus by Niobe, and the Oceanidae Meliboea. The nymph Kulene or Deianira became by him the mother of Lycaon. So we've looked at Lycaon before. That's the person who's transformed into the wolf. So I've covered that on some previous videos. According to others, again, Pelasgus was a son of Arestor and grandson of Iasus, and immigrated into Arcadia, where he founded the town of Parrhasia. And then in Argos, Pelasgus was believed to have been the son of Triopas and Zeus, and brother of Iasus, Agenor and Xanthus, or a son of Pheronius, and to have founded the city of Argos in the Peloponnesus, and to have taught the people agriculture, and to have received Demeter on her wanderings at Argos, where his tomb was shown in later times. So I've just highlighted that because there seems to be something going on from what I was alluding to in earlier videos, where you seem to have groups of people coming into contact with one another, agriculturalists and nomadic pastoralists. So I've been highlighting such things, and this is one example here. So we've got a link here to agriculture and obviously Demeter, Mother Earth. So I just thought that was interesting, and we're going to have a look at that now. Let me just try and find. Just bear with me 1 minute. I'm just going to escape out of this because StreamYard's just got a annoying little. Oh, sorry about that. Right. Sorry, I've not presented it like this before, so I do apologize. So we're just going to have to go. That's the wrong one. There we go. Right. So I'm just going to have to try and zoom in as much as possible here because StreamYard had just had a little logo at the bottom there, which was stopping me from reading the very bottom of the text. So it's not looking as cool as it was in the present mode. So, but we'll go on anyway. So in Thessaly, Pelasgus was described as the father of Chlorus and the grandfather of Haemon, or as the father of Haemon and as the grandfather of Thessalus. And then here I've highlighted this, or again, as a son of Poseidon and Larissa, and as the founder of Thessalian Argos. So we have a version of it here where he's actually the son of Larissa, rather than Larissa being the daughter of Pelasgus. And what's interesting about this is, as well, I've mentioned this in the past, the seeming connections to water, fertile plains, areas of good agriculture, areas that are what's the word conducive for growing crops and grain. And Poseidon here, obviously we have a connection, and when I've looked into it, Poseidon seems to, they believe he was actually originally had something to do with potable water and springs as opposed to the sea, which is quite interesting. So okay, I just want to point out here the word Pelasga, and it occurs as the surname of the Thessalian Hera and of Demeter. And it says here, under this name, and they had a temple at Argos, and was believed to have derived the surname from Pelasgus, the son of Triopas, who had founded her sanctuary. So I just wanted to show that there's a version of Demeter with the surname Pelasga, which is taken after the son of Pelasgus. So let's now jump over to Pausanias, which was referenced here, and take a look at what he's got to say specifically about that. So here we go. The Greeks who dispute most the Athenian claim to antiquity, and the gifts they say they have received from the gods, are the Argives, just as among those who are not Greeks, the Egyptians compete with the Phrygians. It is said then that when Demeter came to Argos, she was received by Pelasgus into his home, and that Chrysanthus, knowing about the rape of the maid, related the story to her. Afterwards, Trochilus, the priest of the mysteries, fled, they say, from Argos because of the enmity of Agenor, and came to Attica and married a woman of Eleusis, by whom he had two children, Eubulius and Triptolemus. That is the account given by the Argives. But the Athenians and those who led them know that Triptolemus, son of Celeus, was the first to sow for cultivation. Okay, so there seems to be some debate here as to who was the first to sow seed for cultivation. But I just want to highlight that it's specifically mentioning sowing seeds, so agriculture. This element of it seems to be related to agriculture as opposed to pastoralism, which is interesting because there was a quote that we looked at in an earlier video which mentioned that the Pelasgians, who were in what we call modern day Italy, it says that they were pastoralists. So just thought that was worth mentioning. Now this next quote by Pausanias: the temple of Hera Anthea, or Flowery, is on the right of the sanctuary of Leto, and before is a grave of woman. They were killed in a battle against the Argives under Perseus, having come from the Aegean islands to help Dionysus in war, for which reason they are surnamed Halii, or women of the sea. Facing the tomb of the woman is a sanctuary of Demeter, surnamed Pelasgian from Pelasgus, son of Triopas, its founder, and not far from the sanctuary is the grave of Pelasgus. So here we have got another mention to a connection and this specific sanctuary of Demeter named Pelasga. So just thought that was interesting to look at there. And then we have this one from Hyginus of Fabulae. Those who first built temples to the gods, Pelasgus, son of Triopas, first made a temple to Olympian Jove in Arcadia. Thessalus raised the temple, which is in Macedonia, of Jove of Dodona, in the land of Molossi. Eleuther first set up a statue to Father Liber and showed how it was tended. Pheronius, son of Inachus, first made a temple of Juno in Argos. Otrera, an Amazon, wife of Mars, first founded the temple of Diana at Ephesus, which later by King, and that's a word that was omitted, was restored. Lycaon, son of Pelasgus, built a temple of Mercury in Culine in Arcadia. So I just thought this was interesting to note how we're talking about people who first made temples here as well, to various deities. So specifically here, Olympian Jove, so Olympian Zeus there. So that's quite interesting also, and I just thought that pertinent to point out. Now let's now have a look at some of the sources which actually mention Pelasgus, because as we saw in Robert Graves' myth, his Pelasgian creation myth, which we explored previously, he mentions Pelasgus and how he was born of the earth, or some say he was the first man to be born. So I thought, let's have a look at this text and what words it's actually using. So Ocean and Tethys, so Oceanus, had a son, Inachus, after whom a river in Argos is called Inachus. He and Melia, daughter of Ocean, had sons, Pheronius and Aegialius. Aegialius, having died childless, the whole country was called Aegialia. And Pheronius, reigning over the whole land afterwards, named Peloponnese, begat Apis and Niobe by a nymph, Teledike. Apis converted his power into a tyranny and named the Peloponnese after himself, Appia. But being a stern tyrant, he was conspired against and slain by Phalexion and Telhis. He left no child, and being deemed a god was called Serapis. But Niobe had by Zeus, and she was the first mortal woman with whom Zeus cohabited, a son Argus, and also, so says Achilles, a son Pelasgus, after whom the inhabitants of the Peloponnese were called Pelasgian. However, Hesiod says that Pelasgus was the son of the soil. And here's the Greek text underneath. So as you can see, it says, Hesiodos deton Pelasgon autochthona fusin enai. But Hesiod says Pelasgus was autochthonous or native or indigenous. So there isn't the term son, weos or weon here, son of the earth. So I just thought I would show you that, because I think this gives you more of like a mythical kind of idea, when in reality it seems like he's trying to actually convey he was just a native of this region. So okay, so there also seems to be a couple of other people, or another person called Pelagon, who's also known as Pelasgus. So I thought that was interesting to look at here. So because it connects back to the Oceanus, and Oceanus also, we saw a mention of that when we explored the Pelasgian creation myth. So we're just going to expand on that a little bit today. So the Asopus River was a son of Ocean and Tethys, or as Asclepius says, of Pero and Poseidon. So I have this mention of Poseidon again here. Or according to some, of Zeus and Eurynomy. Now, Eurynomy we saw was mentioned in the Pelasgian creation myth of Robert Graves. So here we have a mention here. Him, Metope, herself a daughter of the river Ladon, married and bore 2 sons, Ismenus and Pelagon, and 20 daughters, of whom one, Aegina, was carried off by Zeus in search of her Asopus, came to Corinth, and learned from Sisyphus that the ravisher was Zeus. Asopus pursued him, but Zeus, by hurling thunderbolts, sent him away back to his own streams, and hence coals are fetched to this day from the streams of that river. Now, what's interesting to note here is I've been looking at some of the work of Dr. Peter Reves, and he's been looking at the names of rivers and mountains. And I'm going to show you a clip later, actually. And he supposes that you have different names carried by different people, different migratory paths, and that the agriculturalists were in the lowlands, and then later when Indo-Europeans come along, they displace them, in which case the agriculturalists moved out of the high value land. And he also mentions how the older names seem to be the mountains, but he also talks about how groups moving in also seem to adopt words from those that they intermixed with or displaced. So to me, that seems to be something similar going on here. So if we try and ground ourselves in some reality, you know, you've got these group of people, one of the daughters gets carried off by Zeus, and there's going to be more coming up like this, where it's making you think of 2 actually different groups of people rather than, you know, Olympian gods and giants. It seems to be reminiscent of these nomadic pastoralists who've got knowledge of how to make bronze and armor and stuff, coming into contact with agriculturalists who were still using, you know, inferior weaponry, for example, stone tools and things like that, as opposed to bronze and stuff. So that's the kind of idea that we get coming through, and it kind of ties in with the work of this Dr. Reves, which I'm going to show you later. And here you can see that Asopus is chasing Zeus, but Zeus sends him back down to the riverlands, or down to his own streams here. So that's kind of like where my brain's at the moment. So anyway, cracking on. And having conveyed Aegina to the island then named Oenone, but now called Aegina after her, Zeus cohabited with her and begot a son, Iacus, on her. and Icus was alone in the island. Sorry, excuse me. Zeus made the ants into men for him, and Iacchus married Endes, daughter of Sciron, by whom he had 2 sons, Peleus and Telamon. But Pherecudes, who we saw from the when we looked at the Pelasgian creation myth, so he seems to have one of the older creation stories that we looked at, which lines up with the there's some overlap with the creation myth of the Pythagoreans and the Orphic creation myth there. So it's interesting that Apollodorus here is kind of leaning on a little bit of Pherecudes, or certainly mentioning him here. And he mentions that Telamon was a friend and not a brother of Peleus. And Peleus is going to come up quite a lot. Obviously, the name has the Pel root, Peleus, the father of Achilles. So we're going to be looking at that down the line. And now let's have a look what Diodorus has got to say also about this Pelasgus. We shall now recount the story of the daughters of Asopus and the sons who were born of Iacchus. According to the myths, there were born to Oceanus and Tethys a number of children who gave their names to rivers. Okay, so is this a grounding in reality here? A number of children who gave their names to rivers, not necessarily, you know, mythical beings here, people who conveyed their names. And among their number were Peneus and Asopus. Now Peneus made his home in what is now Thessaly and called after himself the river which bears his name. But Asopus made his home in Phlius, where he married Metope, the daughter of Ladon, to whom were born 2 sons, Pelasgus and Ismenus, and 12 daughters. Okay, so all of these stories, they all seem good to go back to Oceanus and Tethys in the descent of these figures. And we're now going to move on to Larissa. So that was just a bit of a recap with Pelasgus, just so I can show how it's going to make more sense as we move forward. So this is just from Wikipedia here, Larissa, daughter of Pelasgus. So Larissa was a nymph from Thessaly. She was described by Pausanias as a daughter of Pelasgus, son of Triopas, king of Argos. Alanicus states that the sons of Poseidon and Larissa were Achilles, Pythias, and Pelasgus. So you can see how those names then go on to be given to various regions. These sons left Argos and arrived in Haemonia, where they drove out the barbarian inhabitants and divided the country into 3 parts, calling them after their names, Phthiotis, Achaia, and Pelasgiotis. Okay, so we've got people moving into a region and driving them out of the area, and then naming the regions after themselves. The arcs of Argos and 2 towns, Larissa in Thessaly and one in the Peneus, are believed to have derived their name meaning citadel from her. So the names are believed to be derived from the legendary figure. And again, from the Dictionary of Greek and Roman Biography and Mythology, we just have their definition of Larissa. A daughter of Pelasgus, from who the arcs of Argos and the 2 Thessalian towns. So obviously that's the source that Wikipedia has used there. And now Perseus Tufts. So notice how it says here, Larissa, a name of many old Greek cities, and we've looked at exactly how many there are in previous videos, and they seem to be all over the place. Pelasgic, according to Strabo, originally it denoted a citadel, such as the Larissa of Argos. So there we go. They believe it originally denoted a citadel there. So we're just going to have a look at some of the sources on Larissa now, see what they've got to say. We're going to jump over to Pausanias, descriptions of Greece here. And it's interesting he mentions the Acropolis here because in a lot of these older, I don't want to say Indo-European cultures, but certainly from what we can see with the Celtic culture in Iberia, the Acropolis seemed to be the highermost place of the settlement, and it was, you know, seemed to be fortified, have a wall around it actually. So it's interesting that they're calling the Acropolis specifically Larissa here in this quote. So the Acropolis they call Larissa after the daughter of Pelasgus. After her were also named 2 of the cities in Thessaly, and the one by the sea and the one on the Peneus. Okay, so that's on the river. As you go up to the Acropolis, you come to the sanctuary of Hera Acraia of the Height, and also a temple of Apollo, which is said to have first been built by Pythias when he came from Pythias. The present image is a bronze standing figure called Apollo Diaradiotes, because this place too is called Deirai Ridge. And this is interesting because it mentions that they were following an oracular cult was being practiced here. So let's see what they've got to say, because this was really interesting actually, because she's mentioned as being having to remain a virgin here, being debarred from intercourse with any man, and then becoming inspired by the god. So, which is interesting. So there is a woman who prophesies being debarred from intercourse with a man. Every month, a lamb is sacrificed at night, and the woman, after tasting the blood, becomes inspired by the god. So, and theos, they're full of the god. So I just thought that was interesting, just to show that there did seem to be an oracular cult going on in this region as well, in the Acropolis. On the top of Larissa is a temple of Zeus, surnamed Larisian, which has no roof. The wooden image I found no longer standing upon its pedestal. There is also a temple of Athena worth seeing. Here are placed offerings including Zoanon, or a wooden image of Zeus, which has 2 eyes in the natural place and a third on its forehead. Now, I just want you to bear this in mind, because there's going to be like a reference to this later on. This Zeus, they say, was Patrus, or ancestral of Priam, the son of Laomedon, and set up the undercover part of this court. And when Ilion was taken by the Greeks, Priam took sanctuary at the altar of this god. When the spoils were divided, Sthenelus, the son of Peneus, received the image, and for this reason it has been dedicated there. The reason for its 3 eyes one might infer to be this: that Zeus is king in heaven is a saying common to all men. As for him who is said to rule the earth, there is a verse of Homer which calls him too Zeus Catachthonius, or of the underworld. So Cata, downward, and Chthonius, the earthy, as we mentioned earlier. So it also means born of the earth, I suppose. And the august Persephone, the god in the sea, also is called Zeus by Aeschylus, the son of Euphorion. So whoever made the image made it with 3 eyes, as signifying that this same god rules in all 3 allotments of the universe, as they are called. To resume, after my researches into Achaean history, the boundary between Achaia and Elis is the river Larissus, and by the river is a temple of Larisian Athena. So it's interesting as well that the boundaries also seem to be quite often formed by the rivers also, which, I mean, it's common sense, it's logical that it would form a natural boundary. But I just wanted to point that out because there's lots of connections here to water and rivers and such. So let's see what Dionysius of Halicarnassus has to say in Roman antiquities. So Pelasgus was the son of Zeus, it is said, and of Niobe, the daughter of Phronius. And then it says the leaders of the colony were Achilles, Theus, and Pelasgus, the son of Larissa and Poseidon. So we looked at that earlier, but I just wanted to point out here that it also mentions later on, after they had remained there 5 generations, during which they attained to the greatest prosperity while enjoying the produce of the most fertile plains in Thessaly. And these fertile plains are going to crop up again, because there's an interesting story about the region actually being boggy and marshy, and then there was a natural disaster which drained these swampy areas, and then they obviously seemed to become fertile, which is something you do often find as water seems to deposit alluvium, which is quite fertile, especially as it reaches the sea. And this is actually in Britain where you find tin deposits in these regions, which also seem to be a large commodity during the Bronze Age and obviously was required to make bronze. So it's interesting that how water seems to deposit these things and also provide fertile soil for cultivating. So you can see how people may have discovered tin in some of these. I'm not specifically talking about this region, but in other areas where there's a lot of this alluvium. So yeah, I just thought I'd mention that because they seem to be inhabiting these plains. These people also possess themselves of no inconsiderable part of the Campanian plains, so more plains here, as they are called, which afford not only very fertile pasturage, so that's for animals, but most pleasing prospects as well. Having driven out the Arunisi, a barbarous nation, out of part of them, there they built various other cities, and also Larissa, a camp they named after their mother city in the Peloponnesus. So they're coming in, they're, moving other people on or out of the region, inhabiting it, and building the citadels in these plain regions. Now, Strabo, geography, let's see what he's got to say. More mention of these plains being deposited by rivers. Now, the city of the Argives is for the most part situated in a plain, but it has for a citadel the place called Larissa, a hill that is fairly well fortified and contains a sanctuary of Zeus. And near the city flows the Inachus, a torrential river that has its sources in Lycaeus, the mountain that is near Crunuria in Arcadia. Now, I know I've mentioned the Celtic Castro culture before, who emerged out of the Bronze Age trade network collapse, and they seem to have a similar kind of system going on where the major rivers on the Western Atlantic facade, they access those, and then they seem to use the rivers to navigate and also have not only a trade network, but an information network as well. And then they had castros or hill forts on the tops of the hills looking down over the fertile land. And then obviously they could withdraw from the fertile pasture into their castros for safety in case of, attack from outsiders. And it's interesting because these seem to have a similar setup here, being situated in the plain, but having a citadel on a highly, well fortified place here. So I just thought that was worth mentioning. I mean, obviously, there's going to be similarities with groups that are deemed to be Proto-Indo-European and having similarities, but I just wanted to highlight and hopefully try and demonstrate from other cultures how similar things were sort of, being, or tactics or ideas were being used. A peculiar thing that happened in the case of the Laricians, I mean the Castrian and the Phoconian Laricians, and third, those in Thessaly. They all held land that was deposited by rivers, by the Caestum, by the Hermus, and by the Peneus. It is at the Phoconian Larissa that Piasus is said to have been honoured, who they say was ruler of the Pelasgians, and fell in love with his daughter Larissa, and having violated her, paid the penalty for the outrage. For observing him leaning over a cask of wine, they say, she seized him by the legs, raised him, and plunged him into the cask. Such are the ancient accounts. So that's what Strabo had to say about Larissa there as well. But a lot more mention of plains and areas deposited by rivers. Now, this is a lengthy quote here, but is from Strabo. And I've highlighted certain areas because we've got a group of people called Lapiths and the Centaurs, who were in the similar region, and they also seem to trace their descent back to Oceanus. And there seems to be a lot of back and forth over this, seemingly an area that warranted being, fought over, really. So I thought I'd highlight a few things because we're going to be looking at the Lapiths and the Centaurs in the future. So I've just highlighted a few things here. The main things I want you to look at here are mentions of the Centaurs being forced out of the area, and how the plains then were given over to the Lapiths. So I've highlighted these just so you can kind of pick out the main important things that I want you to take note of, because it is a lengthy quote. So let's try and get through it. Continuous with this portion of Thessaly is the country of those who are called the subjects of Polypoetes, and those who held Agissa and dwelt in Gertone, or Orthe, and Elone, and the white city, Eluson. In earlier times, the Pelasgians inhabited this country, dwelling in the part near the sea and near the Peneus, extending as far as the outlet and Gerton, a Pelasgian city. Then the Lapiths humbled the Pelasgians and thrust them back into the river country in the interior and seized their colony. I mean the Lapiths, Ichion, and the son Perithous, the latter of whom also took possession of Pelion. Notice it's got the Pel root, forcing out the Centaurs, a wild folk who had seized it. Now these he thrust from Pelion and made them draw near to the Achilles, and he gave over the plains to the Lapiths, though the Pelasgians kept possession of some of them, those near Olympus, and also in some places lived completely intermingled with Lapiths. Now Argissa, the present Argura, is situated on the Peneus, and 40 stadia above it lies Atrax, which also is close to the river, and the Pelasgians held the river country between the two places. Some have called Orthe the Acropolis of the Pelasgians, and Phalana is a Pelasgian city close to the Peneus near Tempe. And this Tempe is going to come up later, so keep a tab on that. Now, the Pelasgians, being overpowered by the Lapiths, for the most part emigrated to the mountainous country about Pindus. Now, this goes back to what I mentioned about Peter Reves' work, which we're going to look at later, so just bear that in mind. And to the countries of the Athamanians and the Dolopians, and there to the mountainous country about Pindus. And the Larisians are going to come in a moment here. And to the countries of the Amathians and the Dolopians, and their country to all the Pelasgians who were left behind, they were seized by the Larisians, who lived near the Peneus, and were their neighbours, and dwelt in the most fertile parts of the plains, though not in the very low region near the lake called Nessonis, into which the river, when it overflowed, would carry away a portion of the arable soil belonging to the Larisians. Later, however, they corrected this by means of embankments. So that's interesting as well, because they're literally geoengineering here. So because the river, when it was overflowing, was getting rid of the arable soil, they corrected that with embankments to stop it, overflowing and washing away. The Larisians then kept possession of Paribia and exacted tribute until Philip established himself as lord over the region. Larissa is also the name of a place on Ossa. There is another is Larissa Cremaste, by some called Pelasgia, and in Crete there is a city Larissa, now joined to Haputna, whence the plain that lies below is now called Larician plain. And in the Peloponnesus, both Larissa, the citadel of the Argives, and the Larissus river, which is the boundary between the Elian country and Dume. And then later on here is mentioned Larissa Cremaste, and it says, for it has an abundance of water and of vineyards. So I just wanted to show more fertile plains, more regions fed by water, boundaries marked out by the rivers, and places with an abundance of water and vineyards. So they seem like places that would be, ripe for settling, really. And Strabo mentions a lot of the Larissas here, and we're just going to look at a map. And this map is from Solving Homer's Riddle, the Larissas of Hippothous and the Pelasgians. So obviously in Homer's Iliad, he mentions Hippothous, who is a descendant of Pelasgus as well. And he mentions that, he dies far away from fertile Larissa. And people have tried to figure out exactly which Larissa it is. But as you can see, there's a lot of these places called Larissa. So they're spread out, they basically cover the extent here of Asia and of Europe. It's fascinating, really, how many they are when you actually. It's not until you place them on a map that you can see how widespread they were. So I just thought I'll put that on there so you can all see. Just zoom in a bit more. So yeah, largely situated here, obviously around the Mediterranean, some over in Italy, some on the coast of the Black Sea near the Danube, Varna there, in Turkey, Syria, and further over here. So, and that one is in Assyria. So yeah, there's quite a few of them. Okay, so here we're going to look at something which is reminiscent of the Paloria festival that we looked at earlier, and which was mentioned also by Robert Graves. But I've showed you a mention of this festival earlier and its connection to Saturnalia. So have a look back in the videos regarding the Pelasgians for that one. So Lucian in his Pharsalia here. Thessalia, on the side where Titan first raised the wintry day by Ossa's rocks, is prisoned in, but in the advancing year, where higher in the vault his chariot rides, 'tis Pelion that meets the morning rays, and when beside the lion's flames he drives the middle course, Othrus with wooden top screens and chief ardour. On the hither side, Pindus receives those breezes of the west, and as the evening falls, brings darkness in. There to Olympus, at whose foot who dwells who dwells nor fears the north, nor sees the shining bear. Between these mountains, hemmed in ancient time, the fields were marsh. So this is referring to what I mentioned earlier about this land being marshland, and then something happens and it all drains out, and then what was left was, some of these plains. Between these mountains, Olympus and Ossa there, hemmed in ancient time, the fields were marsh. For Tempe's Pass, not yet was cleft to give an exit to the streams that filled the plain. But when Alcides' hand smote Ossa from Olympus at a blow, the Nereus wondered at the sudden flood of waters to the main. Then on the shore would it have slept for ever beneath the deep? Sea-born Achilles home, Pharsalus rose, and Phulace, whence sailed that ship of old, whose keel first touched upon the beach of Troy. And again, we get another mention of this, of Achilles being called Larissa, and this is in Servius's commentary on the Aeneid. And he has to say, Larissa Achilles is named for his vicinity, for he was from Phthia. Both are cities in Thessaly. Larissa was named after the nymph Larissa, from whom Neptune created Pelasgus and Theon. And this is interesting because Achilles does pray to Pelasgian Zeus as well. And as I've said, we're going to look at that. But just bear in mind this Tempe's Pass, draining the marshes and getting rid of all that water and leaving these plains and revealing places that they would have slept forever beneath the waves had this natural disaster not occurred. And Homer in the Iliad, so this just shows how Hippothous is mentioned as a descendant from Pelasgus. So, and Hippothous led the tribes of the Pelasgi that raged with the spear. This is Homer's Iliad. Even them that dwelt in the deep soil Larissa. These were led by Hippothous and Pulias, scion of Ares, sons twain of Pelasgus Lethus, son of Tutimus. And Tutimus is also known as Tutamides. So Apollodorus here says from Zelia, Pandarus, son of Lycaon, from Adrastia, Adrastus, and Amphius, sons of Merops, from Arispe, Asius, son of Hurtacus, from Larissa, Hippothous, son of Pelasgus. And in Roman histories by Dionysius of Halicarnassus, so he mentions Tutamides, which is the same as Tutimus in the first quote there by Homer. These highs words in the Pharaonis. Phrastor was the son of Pelasgus, their king, and Menippe, the daughter of Peneus. His son was Amuntor, Muntor's son was Tutamides, and the latter's son was Nanas. And eventually, the descendants of Pelasgus, they sail to Italy and found a colony there as well. So that's interesting. Check out some of the older videos for more on that. So I just want to show here Phrastor, son of Pelasgus, and Menelape, who's the daughter of Peneus. Now we also have Pelasgus, son of Triopas here, when you look at Pelasgus's lineage. And that name means he who has 3 eyes, which seems to be a reference to the Zeus that we talked about earlier with the 3 eyes. Son of Pyrrhas. And Pyrrhas via Strumon and Peneus, both directly are both descendants of Oceanus and Tethys when you look into the mythology. So I just wanted to show how, it all goes back to Oceanus. So let's have a look at Peneus then. Let's go up the chain. Let's have a look at Peneus. So in Greek mythology, he was a Thessalian river god, one of the 3,000 rivers, a child of Oceanus and Tethys. The nymph Creusa bore him one son, Hypseos, who was king of the Lapiths. So again, the Lapiths keep cropping up, as you saw earlier. And 3 daughters, Menelape, and then it says mother of Phrastor by Pelasgus. And then Seneca, natural questions here. Now notice how this is once again similar to the Peloria festival, and how it's very similar to the quote we just looked at about Ossa and Olympus. Long ago, if one may believe the story, Ossa and Olympus were united. Subsequently, they were separated by an earthquake, and the one great mountain was split into 2. Then the Peneus river made its escape, draining the marshes with which Thessaly was overspread, and drawing off the waters from which want of exit had hitherto formed a lake. So look, it was all marshy land. It seemed to be rather unusable until this happened. And what's interesting is they do attribute some of the contributing factors to the Bronze Age collapse to be famine and natural disasters such as earthquakes and drought and such. So it really makes you start thinking about what time period are they actually talking about here. Now, this is the same quote from Seneca here, but this is the quote from Athenaeus from Deep No Sophistae, which I mentioned is the quote about the Peloria festival, and it also says how it's similar to Saturnalia. So just compare this to the story of Ossa and Olympus and the earthquake separating them and the water escaping through the hole between them. When a common festival was being celebrated by all the Pelasgi, a man who was named Pelorus, Pel root there, brought news to Pelasgus that there had been some violent earthquakes in Haemonia, by which the mountains called Tempe had been rent asunder. So it's the Tempe Pass, so it's the same story. And that the water of the lake had burst through the rent and was all falling into the stream of the Peneus, and that all the country which had formerly been covered by the lake was now laid open, and that as the waters were now drained off, there were plains visible of wondrous size and beauty. And obviously Pelasgus, he takes this Peneus and he basically waits upon him, hand and foot, and he's a stranger, but they receive him because he's done this good deed, they wait upon him and give him a prime seat at the table. So that's where there seems to be an echo of the Saturnalia, that, switching round, servant becoming king becoming servant type idea. Okay, so Hesiod in his Theogony here, just wanted to point out the people we're interested in. So as I mentioned earlier, Strumon seems to be a descendant or a relative of Pelasgus, and Peneus there is, sorry, let me just clarify that. So Pyrrhas via Strumon is a descendant of Oceanus, and Pelasgus is a descendant of Pyrrhas, and then we have Phrastor, son of Menelape, daughter of the Peneus. So that's Pelasgus who marries Menelape, who's the daughter of the Peneus river. So I just wanted to show how that all goes back there to Oceanus. And so it says here, this is the bit I want you to pay attention to. And Tethys bore to ocean eddying rivers, Nilus and Alpheus, and deep swirling Eridanus. And then we have Strumon there. We have the Peneus, which I've highlighted. Also, she brought forth a holy company of daughters, and I just want to point out that, one of them's Eurynomy, who Robert Graves mentions in that Pelasgian creation myth, or what he calls the Pelasgian creation myth. So I just wanted to point that out to you there. Now, Hesiod also mentions the Peneus, and I just want to point this out because I thought it's another Pel root here, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking to see if this root, is a thing, if it's related to water or the sea. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just making observations here, and we're exploring them. So Cyrene, or like her, beautiful Cyrene, who dwelt in Phthia by the water of the Peneus, and had the beauty of the Graces. So that was just a fragment there from Hesiod. And then here's another fragment. And it says here, there is a land called Elopia, with much glebe and rich meadows, and rich in flocks and shambling kin. There dwell men who have many sheep and many oxen, and they are numbering past telling tribes of mortal men. So these seem like animal herders here. So rich meadows, rich in flocks, men dwelling there who have many sheep and many oxen. So that's making me think more of cattle herders. That seems to align more with the pastoralism. And there upon its border is built a city, Dodona, which also has, as we've seen, has connections to the Pelasgoi. So check out some of my previous videos for more on Dodona. And Zeus loved it and appointed it to be his oracle, revered by men. And they, the doves, lived in the hollow of an oak. From then men of earth carry away all kinds of prophecy. Whoever so fares to that spot and questions the deathless god and comes bringing gifts with good omens. So we're going to look at these doves in a minute. So just put a pin on that one. So Zosimus in New History here. Now this is interesting as well because he's talking about an early form of worship here, and he also talks about the actual origin of the term pontifex. So, and it also has a connection to the Peneus. So I just thought it was interesting to mention. So Zosimus, New History. At a period before mankind were acquainted with the mode of worshipping by statues, some images of the gods were first made in Thessaly. So this must be like a really early time then. As they were not then any temples, for the use of them was likewise then unknown, which is interesting because we've seen Pelasgus was described as being some of the first people who built temples. And it says, they fixed up those figures of the gods on a bridge over the river Peneus, and called those who sacrificed to the gods Gefurai, priests of the bridge, obviously Gefura bridge, from the places where the images were first erected. Hence the Romans, deriving it from the Greeks, called their own priests pontifexes, and enacted a law that kings, for the sake of dignity, should be considered of the number. So I just thought that was really interesting, as it's putting these early images of the gods, these wooden images, in this region that we're obviously interested in. So Procopius on buildings, let's have a look what he's got to say, because he also mentions how it's basically a good place for growing crops. But now that we have reached Thessaly, let us direct our account at once to Mount Pelion, another Pel kind of route in there, and the Peneus River. This river flows from Mount Pelion with a gentle stream which encircles and beautifies the city of Larissa. The country is indeed productive of all kind of crops and has surfeit of drinking water. So I just wanted to mention that again. It also goes on about the centaurs and the Lapiths. So just bear that in mind, put that on the back burner for the future. So let's have a look at Oceanus, because we're getting hints of pre-Proto-Indo-European myth, Indo-European concepts and names. So we're now going to look at Oceanus. So this is the first bit here is just from Wikipedia. In Greek mythology, Oceanus was a Titan, son of Uranus and Gaia, the husband of his sister, the Titan Tethys, and the father of the river gods and the Oceanids, as well as being the great river which encircled the entire world. Now, I want you to take note of this river that encircles the entire world, because it's going to crop up in other mythologies as well. According to M.L. West, the etymology of Oceanus is obscure and cannot be explained from Greek. The use by Pherakoudes of Souros of the form orgenos, which we looked at in the last live stream, and it's interesting because we have orge and organe, so and it's very similar to gay. The use by Pherakoudes of Souros from the form orgenos from the name lends support for the name being a loan word. So they're looking at it being a pre-Greek, non-Indo-European word that has been loaned into the Greek here. And we're going to look at the Etymological Dictionary of Greek by Robert Beeks here, just to show that he believes that it's of non-Indo-European origin. So, Oceanos, name of a river that surrounds the world, ocean. And then he gives some different variations of it here. Organe, Organos, Orgenos, Organos, which is how you see it in Pherakoudes. Oceanis, which is of the ocean. Oceanides, the daughters of the ocean. So he's just giving you the different forms of the word there, and different suffixes, different endings. Etymology. Since the idea of a world river is not of Indo-European origin, the word must be a loan. And then he goes on to say, all attempts to find an Indo-European etymology have so far failed. They've tried Sanskrit. And he says further indications that the word is not inherited from Proto-Indo-European, but rather pre-Greek, are the variants with gamma instead of kappa cited above. And then he goes on to say that when he's tried to reconstruct it, the form he comes up with is, therefore I constructed a pre-Greek form, ukan. So you can see how that's similar to ocean there, or Okeanos. So that's his reconstruction of the term. Now, what's interesting about this is, so we seem to have a group of people who seem to have some elements which seem to be, what you'd consider to be Greek. They're also got some elements of descent from Oceanos, which may be non-Greek in origin. And what I would just want you to look at is a prime example of where you get a group of people who became a new people. And I've been looking at the Hatti and the Hittites. So the Hatti were a group of people. That was what they called themselves, the Hatti. And the Hittites came, a branch of what they call Indo-Europeans. They, I don't want to say conquered, but they seemed to create a tiered system. And the upper class, the top tier, seemed to, what's the best way to ensure a future? You're going to marry your leaders with their leaders. And this is why you kind of seem to get, whether through force, why is Zeus obsessed with kidnapping other people's daughters and stuff? And, it gets me thinking out of the fairy tale of it. So you have these groups coming in, their leaders both intermarry. And then obviously from then on, their descendants, that royal line, they seem to adopt elements of the autochthonous, the native side of things, and also still utilize areas of what you would consider Proto-Indo-European. And the Hittites would recite certain elements or record certain elements written in the Hatti language. They also still called the city and the place, the people of Hatti and stuff. So to me, it seems like something similar could potentially going on here, and that's why the Pelasgians may have been a group of people who are almost two groups of people that have come together. They've got elements of both things, because as I've said, they seem to be settling places where you have agriculture and growing, but then you have other sources saying that they're pastoralists, and you're thinking, I'm just wondering if that's what's going on here. So in my mind, that's where my head's at when I'm looking at this. I'm trying to get out of mythological thinking and trying to apply it to what we can see in archaeology and anthropology. Okay, so this furthers on from Robert Beeks here. Passages in a section of the Iliad called The Deception of Zeus suggest the possibility that Homer knew a tradition in which Oceanus and Tethys, rather than Uranus and Gaia, as in Hesiod, were the primeval parents of the gods. So that was, pretty interesting to me. And let's have a look at some of those passages that he mentions here. So this is from Homer's Iliad. For I am faring to visit the limits of the all-nurturing earth and Oceanus, from whom the gods are sprung, and Mother Tethys. We have another mention here. Go back and read these quotes in full. That's why I've put them up on screen here. Then with crafty mind the queenly Hera spoke unto him, I am faring to visit the limits of the all-nurturing earth and Oceanus, from whom the gods are sprung, and Mother Tethys. And then in this passage here, the streams of the river Oceanus, from whom they are all sprung. So I just wanted to show those quotes that Beeks was referring to there. And in Greek mythology by Robin Hard, look what he mentions here. Oceanos was the god of the ocean, a great river that was thought to encircle the lands of the earth on every side. And then from Homer's Odyssey, she came to deep flowing Oceanus that bounds the earth. So I think we're thinking of that ring, that all encompassing circle, encircling the Mediterranean, the middle land, middle earth. Artemis, mighty goddess, daughter of Zeus, would fix thy arrow in my breast and take away my life even in this hour, or that a storm wind might catch me up and bear me hence over the murky ways and cast me forth at the mouth of backwards flowing Oceanus. And then in the Iliad we also get another mention here, and also Eurynomy. Then had I suffered woes in heart, had not Eurynomy and Thetis received me into their bosom. Eurynomy, daughter of backwards flowing Oceanus. And the word being used is apsoros, backflowing, refluent, Homeric epithet of ocean, regarded as a stream encircling the earth and flowing back into itself. And that's from the LSJ. And just some more examples here of how Oceanus is described as being circular, because we see Oceanus being mentioned as being depicted on the shield of Achilles and the shield of Heracles. So this is from Homer's Iliad. Therein he set also the great might of the river Oceanus around the uttermost rim of the strongly wrought shield. But when he had wrought the shield great and sturdy, then wrought he for him a corslet brighter than the blaze of fire. Yeah. Sounds like a nice bronze corslet there. And he wrought for him a heavy helmet fitted to his temples, a fair helm, richly dight, and set thereon a crest of gold. And he wrought him greaves of pliant tin. Using tin, very interesting. But I'm guessing the word could potentially be the same in the Greek, so I'll have to look at that. But when the glorious god of the two strong arms had fashioned all the armour, he took and laid it before the mother of Achilles, and like a falcon he sprang down from snowy Olympus, bearing the flashing armour from Hephaestus. Sorry, like a falcon she sprang down. So the shield of Heracles here, mentioned by Hesiod, and there was set out for them within the course of a great tripod of gold, the splendid work of cunning Hephaestus, and round the rim ocean was flowing with a full stream, as it seemed, and enclosed all the cunning work of the shield. Now, I just want to give you some examples here of how the habitable earth has been described. So this is from Eusebius, Preparation for the Gospel. And this is a reconstruction of Hecataeus' world map that you see here on the right. So you can see how ocean is depicted as that body of water encompassing the habitable, or what was seen to be the world map at the time. Moreover, the Egyptians, describing the world from the same idea, engraved the circumference of a circle, of the colour of the sky and of fire, and a hawk-shaped serpent stretch across the middle of it, and the whole shape is like our theatre, representing the circle as the world, and signifying by the serpent, which Philo connects it in the middle, the good daimon. So I'm wondering if that's, you know, depicting the theatre there, the circle with the theatre in the middle, the serpent across the middle there. And then in Phaedo by Plato. Now these streams are many and great and of all sorts, but among the many are 4 streams, the greatest and outermost of which is that called Oceanus, which flows round in a circle. Now we've just seen that that Beeks doesn't think that Oceanus has an Indo-European origin, which is interesting because we find a similar idea in the Norse mythology, which many think they're, you know, many associate them as, you know, one of the epitomes of a, you know, proto-Indo-European group. However, you have the similar dichotomy in their mythology of the Jotnar or giants versus the Orsir or the gods. And Jotnar gets translated as giant, but as we've seen in previous videos, that's not the case. They're not specifically larger in stature, much like the giants in the Greek mythology, and they seem to just be called that to distinguish them from the Orsir. Now, one of the sons of these Jotnar is Jormungandr, which is is like basically the giant serpent that bites its own tail, and he gets cast into the ocean, which surrounds Midgardr or Midgard. So, as we've seen, non-Proto-Indo-European, but we find the same concept in a wider Proto-Indo-European myth, which must mean that they got it from a non-Indo-European group. So Jotnar, again, normally translated as giants. When you actually look in like the Cleesby Vigfusson Norse dictionary or what some of the authorities on the Old Norse language are saying, it doesn't necessarily mean that. It means a different tribe. So does it mean people who are the equivalent of autochthonous, people who were native, non-Indo-European? Is that what these Jotnar are? So let's have a look from the Gulfagening here. Yet more children had Loki. Angrboda was the name of a certain giantess in Jotunheim, with whom Loki gat 3 children. One was Fenris Wolf, the second Jormungandr, that is the Midgard serpent. Midgard, we're going to look at the etymology of that word in a moment. The third is Hel. But when the gods learned that this kindred was nourished in Jotunheim, which is like the land of the Jotnar, and when the gods perceived by prophecy that from this kindred great misfortune should befall them, and since it seemed to all that there was great prospect of ill, first from the mother's blood and yet worse from the father's, then All-Father, or Odin, sent gods thither to take the children and bring them to him. So he's taking the children, you know, is that kind of like a control method? And then what does he do? When they came to him straight away, he cast the serpent into the deep sea, where he lies about all the land. And the serpent grew so greatly that he lies in the midst of the ocean, encompassing all the land, and bites upon his own tail. So it's clearly a all-encompassing ocean that encompasses all of the land. So yes, it's in another Proto-Indo-European myth, but as we've seen, not necessarily Proto-Indo-European in origin. And let's have a look at the Cleesby and Vigfusson, what they've got to say about the word Midgardr. So this is what it means: the mid-yard, middle town, i.e. the earth. A mythological world common to all ancient Teutonic languages. The earth, Midgard, Midgardr, the abode of men, is seated in the middle of the universe, bordered by mountains and surrounded by this great sea. And the etymology, the words are not cognate, but Mediterranean and Midgardr seem to mean the similar things. They seem to be trying to convey the same idea in their respective languages. So this is just from etymology.com. It says Midgard is the realm of human beings in Norse mythology. The Old Norse word garðr literally means enclosure or yard, and you'll see it in like the fanciful English word garth. And Míðr, middle, refers to its position as a circle with both an interior ocean and an outer ocean, beyond which there lies the dangerous world outside this safe yard. So it means middle town, middle yard, and the Old Norse dictionary, Cleesby and Vigfusson, which is like the equivalent of the LSJ for Old Norse, i.e. the earth. So it's like the middle earth, mid-yard, mid-town. And the etymology for Mediterranean, from Mediterraneus, from medius, middle, and terra, earth or land. So it's interesting that the same concept does seem to have travelled, but we know there was an agricultural expansion, way before the expansion of the Proto-Indo-Europeans. So anyway, let's park that to one side for now. If you want to know more about that and how there seems to be a connection between the Osir in the Norse mythology and the Isa in the Etruscan mythology, and how the earliest form of Germanic writing was using the Etruscan alphabet, and that's from a helmet that was found. Then check out some of my previous videos on that, because this could be how that similar idea has spread, I'm guessing, through the agriculturalist expansion here. Anyway, on to the doves that I mentioned earlier. So they were the fragments that I mentioned earlier. Now, let's have a look at this. Peleas, which is the singular form of Pleiades, which is the word being used here. So see how it says an Indian fruit pigeon, i.e. the dove. But also look, it says Pleiades, which, as I've said, is the feminine nominative plural version of Peleas. Look, it says equals Pleiades. And then look, Pleiades. So it looks like another Pel root there. The Pleiades, 7 daughters of Atlas, placed by Zeus among the stars, probably from Pleto to sail, because they rose at the beginning of the sailing season. So poets adopting the form Pleiades, representing them as doves. So I just wanted to show that there's another Pel root here, and that's going to lead us on to a form of sea navigation called a pelorus. So in marine navigation, a pelorus is a reference tool for maintaining bearing of a vessel at sea. It is a simplified compass without a directive element, suitably mounted and provided with vanes to permit observation of relative bearings. Now, some of the stars used that they use with the pelorus, check it out here, and they all seem to be obviously important constellations or stars: Polaris, Ursa Minor, Ursa Major, Alpha Cassiopeiae, Capella, Vega, Arcturus, the Pleiades, Altair, Orion's Belt, Sirius, Beta Scorpionis, Antares, Alta Centauri, Canopus, Achernar, and then Southern Cross. So I just find that very interesting. So the first thing I thought was, let's have a look at the etymology of the word pelorus. And it said on Wikipedia, and it says, I'm sure it says here, oh yeah, the instrument, just under this section here, the instrument was named for one Pelorus, said to have been the pilot for Hannibal circa 203 BC. And I thought, that word seems old to me, just from what I've been looking at. I'd be very surprised if that's, just appeared here and this word's been used from that period. So I looked at the Dictionary of Greek and Roman Geography, and because there's a place called Pelorus, and it's off the coast of Sicily. So Pelorus, a celebrated promontory of Sicily forming the eastern extremity of the whole island. And look here, a strange story is told by some Roman writers that it derives its name from the pilot of Hannibal, who was put to death by that general from a suspicion of treachery, thus overlooking the fact that it was known by that name to the Greeks for centuries before the time of Hannibal. So as soon as I saw that, I was feeling very happy, because I thought that didn't sound right to me earlier, that, you know, that's just cropped up then. And check it out here. It says, it is to this range of mountains that the name of Mons Neptunius is applied by Solinus, and which that author describes as separating the Tyrrhenian and Adriatic, i.e. Sicilian seas. So we saw that there was a connection earlier to Poseidon. We have an appellation here, the mountains of Neptune. So the mountains are named after Neptune, or the equivalent Poseidon there. And we also have a connection between the Pelasgians and the Tyrrhenians or Thessalians. Check out some of the previous videos for more on that. But I'm just showing here that this mountain range is separating the Tyrrhenian and Adriatic seas. So I'm just trying to show, to me, that's an area of interest just to bear in mind. Now, from the Dictionary of Greek and Roman Geography, again here, the headland of Pelorus may thus be looked upon as the extremity of a great mountain promontory formed by the range of the Mons Neptunis. And then it says here, Pelorus was an important naval station, and as such, its name is frequently mentioned in history. So I just wanted to show how it seems to have a connection here to the sea, again being an important naval base. The name of an important naval base. A tradition reported by Diodorus. I just want to show how it goes back to the giants, how there's mention of Orion here. A tradition reported by Diodorus, but as ancient as the time of Hesiod, represented it as an artificial work. This is the promontory of Pelorus, as being constructed by the giant Orion. And look how it's got connections again here to water and how to sustain yourself. Within this sandy point between the beach and the hills are enclosed two small lakes or pools which are famous for producing the best eels and cockles in Sicily, a reputation they already enjoyed in ancient times, as the cockles of Pelorus are repeatedly noticed by Athenaeus and Solinus, who mention the lakes in question and speaks of them as abounding in fish. And so again here, we have the word Pelagos here in Greek, refers to the sea, especially the high sea. Pelagos, the sea, especially the high sea. But look, see how it also mentions the equivalent of Latin Pelagus. So it's very similar to the name Pelasgus at this stage. And we have seen how variations in dialect, the sigma can drop out in Tyrrhenian, Thessalian, depending on, you know, the dialectical difference there. And then we can see Pelagus here. It says equivalent to Pelagos we've just looked at, and the connection to the sea there. So finally, I just want to have a look at the work here of Dr. Peter Reves, University of Nebraska, Lincoln. And what he's actually done is he's looked at all of these appellations of mountain names, river names and such, and he's had a look and he's tried to piece together where these names come from, which group of peoples, the paths that they migrated in. So we're just going to take a look at this quickly. So we're going to 3441. We're just going to look at the summary. I'm going to put this a link in the description here, so you can check it out afterwards, so you can check out the full video. So just before he gets into it, he's showing how the Anatolian agricultural expansion, which is the yellow arrow, which happened earlier, and then he's showing here the steppe nomadic expansion and the routes that they took. And then these areas here, such as Basque, Etruscan, the areas that are in the white circle there, what he's saying is these are like possible what he calls refuge areas, or pockets that didn't receive much influx of steppe nomadic expansion. We know places like Etruria did to a certain extent. You know, they have some what's generally thought to be Yamnaya genetics. However, there seem to be what he calls refuge areas where they didn't receive much of an influx, and as such retained some of that native, more of that native identity, I suppose, so the language and such. So let's have a look what he's got to say. So he's just going to now expand with his conclusion here of his study. So it's just a couple of minutes, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give my thoughts, and then I'm going to just let him play the last little bit where he gives an example of the Hatti and the Hittites there, and then we're going to just wind down and close, finish this up soon. So let's just have a look at his conclusion. All right. Right, sorry about that, guys. I've just I can't actually see the chat here on the thing, so I don't know why that's not playing. What I'm going to do, so basically what he's saying is that he believes that the most ancient river names originated from the Near East and the Caucasus, likely from farmers. Probably hunter-gatherers dominated the mountains and the farmers the river valleys. And then what he's saying is the people who lived there, they named the regions, and the other people who lived in the other regions seem to accept those names. But notice how he says the farmer river names may have been god names. And we saw earlier there was mention of how we had mention of these children of ultimately from Oceanus who gave their names to the rivers and stuff. So it's a shame I can't get this to work right now. I'll get it figured out for next time. So if I'm ever going to present something again, we're going to have audio and stuff. And I'll post a link for this in the description. But I just thought it seemed like, as I'd already done this research, and then I came across the video and I thought, wow, this seems to actually line up quite well, where you've got groups of different people coming together, assimilating each other maybe to different degrees depending on different regions. And I think we can see elements of that. Of these agriculturalists coming into contact with the farmers, and then you get like a bit of a mix where there's some adoption, and we see that with the Hatti and the Hittites, as I mentioned earlier. And I just thought it was interesting. Is that what we've got going on with the Pelasgians? Because they seem to have, one side of them seems to talk about how they descended from people who gave the names to the rivers and stuff. And as Dr. Peter Reves says here, the farmers' river names may have been god names as well. That's kind of like what we can see here. And what I'm trying to say ultimately, because what he says about the Hittites is, I'll just paraphrase it here quickly, is that you have a group of people called the Hatti. The Hittites come in, who are nomadic pastoralists. They come in and they create a tier system. They intermarry with the elite of the autochthonous people, if you want to use that term. And then their descendants are the ruling class. And this ruling class seem to adopt elements of both sides and this kind of create another culture, ultimately, which then, you know, go on. So what I'm asking the question is the Asir and the Jotnar in the Norse mythology, is that a remnant of that? Is the over in the Indus Valley, the Ashura and Dewas, because Ashura seems to be cognate with Asir. Again, is that the same thing going on here? And the Olympians and the, you know, what are called giants here, is that what's going on? Is it groups of people who, because of their different mode of survival, you know, farming, pastoralism, having different names, coming together, is that the Pelasgians a culmination of an early kind of interaction, and that's why they seem to have got similar both sides going on? Is that why the Etruscans have some genetics from the Yamnaya but retain their language? Was it a lesser influx? These are just questions that I'm asking, so I'm really interested to hear what your thoughts are. Sorry, you've probably just been sat there for 2 minutes just listening to silence. I do apologize, and I'll get that sorted for next time. So we're going to wind down now. This is going to be the end of the presentation. And what we're going to look at next is Peleus, the father of Achilles, Achilles' connection to the Pelasgians. We're going to look at the Lapiths and the Centaurs, the centaurs as well. So these are things we're going to be pursuing moving forward. So let me get back to StreamYard here quickly. Damn, I hate that. So there we go. I'm really sorry, guys, about that sound. It's my first time doing the presenting that as a video, so I do apologize. So I can't wait to catch up on the chat. Obviously, I'm struggling to navigate both, looking at the chat and navigating the presentation. So thanks everyone who's made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching for 1 hour 22. I'm going to be back into a regular routine, and I've been working on some other things behind the scenes. So all the best to you all the best for the new year, and I look forward to chatting you in the comments. So peace. Catch you on the next one, guys.